That baby ain't mine. The words erupted like a shotgun blast in the sterile corridor of Bronx Community Hospital. Cold, final, brutal. You really think I'd fall for this? He barked, voice rising with each word. A maid? A nobody? This is pathetic. Maya, 29, sat motionless on the hospital bed, arms wrapped protectively around her newborn. Her hands, though trembling, cradled the baby with fierce tenderness. Her eyes were red and swollen, but not from the birth, from everything else. She didn't answer him. Her lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. Her body curled slightly forward, sheltering the child like a mother shielding against a storm. I came here to be sure, Travis continued, pacing like a caged animal, to see this with my own eyes so you never pull this crap again. Travis, Maya's voice was a whisper, hoarse from fatigue and grief. Please, just look at him. I did look, he snapped. He looks like every other damn baby in this place. Oh. Maya shifted her grip, turning the baby slightly. A shaft of morning light from the hospital window fell across his face. That's when it happened. Travis saw them. The eyes. That eerie, unmistakable storm gray hue. His eyes. And his father's before him. A color so rare it was practically a signature. His gaze drifted down to the baby's skin. Pale. Creamy. Too light to ignore. His heart skipped, just once. A hiccup of hesitation in a man who prided himself on absolute control. But then, he blinked, shook his head, and looked away. Nah, he muttered. Coincidence. Genetics are messy. That doesn't mean a damn thing. The world went silent in that half-second. Time froze. Maya watched him watch the flicker of recognition, the tiny crack forming in his towering wall of denial. A soft sound escaped Maya's throat, half sob, half breath. She bent down and kissed her child's forehead, then held him tighter, as if the harder she held, the less it would all hurt. You planned this, Travis snarled. You probably had someone else's baby and figured you'd pin it on me. Must have thought it was a golden ticket. His words sliced through the room like broken glass. Maya flinched but didn't look up. People were watching now, staff, patients, family members waiting for lab results or visiting loved ones, but none of them stepped in. None of them questioned the powerful white man in an expensive coat pointing fingers at a black woman in a hospital gown. You think just 'cause you slept in my house, that gives you the right to ruin my name? Travis leaned in closer. You're trash. I gave you a job. And this is how you repay me? You're not just a liar, you're delusional. She's just trying to trap him. I bet she did it on purpose. She should be ashamed. Whispers grew like mold on damp walls. Maya heard everyone. Still, she said nothing. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet tears streak down her face. Not the loud, dramatic sobs you see in movies. These were different. Quiet. Heavy. Tired. She didn't fight back. There was no point. The war had already happened. What remained was survival. Her mind drifted not willingly, but as if to escape the present. She saw flashes of the past, the winter gala, the marble halls glowing under chandeliers, laughter and clinking glasses. Travis, red-faced and drunk, calling her into his office because he'd spilled bourbon. You're different, Maya, he slurred, leaning against the doorframe. Not like the others. You listen. She had stood frozen, unsure, her apron still on, her hands clutching the rag. He stepped closer. It's lonely, he had murmured. People only love me when I'm winning. She remembered the way he touched her cheek, the false softness in his voice, the promises whispered in that dark room. I wouldn't hurt you, he had said. You're safe here. That same night, he left her in silence, no word, no remorse. The next day, she folded his shirts like nothing had happened. And weeks later, when the test turned positive, she gathered every ounce of courage to tell him. She remembered standing in the driveway, holding the result in her hand. He barely looked at it. You're joking, he'd said, smirking. It's not mine. I haven't been with anyone else, Maya had replied. He rolled his eyes, pulled out his checkbook. Get rid of it, he said flatly, and don't come back. No arguments, no hesitation. Just a $50,000 check and a slammed door. Now here they were 9 months later. He still didn't believe her. Go ahead, he growled, yanking off his gloves. Call the press. Call a lawyer. You'll get nothing. This," he gestured toward the baby, "isn't mine." "You saw his eyes, Travis," Maya said softly. "The same gray as yours. You can lie to the world, but not to yourself." He scoffed and turned away. "I see what I want to see, and I see a liar trying to scam her way into a trust fund." "Then leave," Maya said quietly. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't break. It simply cut. "If you have no heart, then go. I won't beg." Travis paused, then walked to the door. For a moment, he looked back, at her, at the baby, but he said nothing. He saw that baby's eyes again in his mind, a color that shouldn't exist twice by chance. He stepped out, and the door closed behind him. Maya let out a sob she'd held in for hours, maybe days. She buried her face into Caleb's tiny body, rocking back and forth as if motion could stop pain. The baby stirred, then settled. She whispered through tears, "You're not a mistake. You're my reason." Outside, Travis stood beneath the hospital's awning. Snowflakes began to fall, soft and slow. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out that same crumpled check, creased from months of denial. For a long moment, he stared at it. Then, with a sigh, he ripped it in half, letting the pieces fall onto the sidewalk. But inside, the storm had only just begun. 2 years earlier, the Holt estate was a fortress of silence. Secluded deep within the rolling hills of Fairfield County, Connecticut, the mansion stretched across 6 acres of manicured lawns, marble patios, and glass-walled rooms filled with expensive nothingness. Everything sparkled, but everything echoed. Maya William had been working there for 3 months. She was quiet, efficient, invisible the way the job required. Each morning began before sunrise. By 5 a.m., she'd be folding monogrammed towels, wiping down untouched surfaces, prepping coffee for a man who barely acknowledged her presence. Travis Holt didn't speak unless it was a command. Polish the floors. Don't leave fingerprints on the glass. Have the guest room ready. Maya had learned his rhythms. She knew how he liked his ties hung color-coded. She knew he preferred fresh strawberries with the stems cut a certain way. She also knew he never smiled, never once. On the outside, Travis was the American dream. A billionaire tech icon. CEO of a company that had changed the way people moved through the world. But behind the scenes, he was a machine. Cold, sharp, and most dangerously bored. That winter gala changed everything. It was mid-December. The estate was flooded with people, executives, politicians, actors. The air buzzed with privilege and alcohol. Maya worked the event like a ghost, floating from room to room with trays of champagne and forced smiles. Later that night, after the last car had rolled down the gravel driveway, Travis called her into his private study. "Maya," he slurred from his leather armchair, glass in hand, shirt unbuttoned halfway. "Come in." She hesitated. "Do you need something cleaned?" He waved the question off. "Sit." Her hands tightened on the tray she held. "Sir, I said sit." The study smelled of cigar, smoke, and whiskey. A record player hummed something low and melancholy in the corner. Outside, snow was falling gently, quietly. Travis took a long sip from his glass, then looked at her with a gaze she didn't recognize. It wasn't cold. It wasn't commanding. It was empty. "Do you know what it's like," he said, "to have everything and still feel like nothing?" Maya didn't respond. He laughed bitterly. "Of course you don't. You still believe in people, in purpose. That's cute." She started to rise, but he grabbed her wrist, not violently, not forcefully. Just enough to stop her. "You listen," he said, his voice dropping. "You're different. You don't pretend. You don't want anything from me. You just exist. It's nice." "I think I should go," Maya said softly. "Why?" he asked. "Afraid I'll hurt you?" "No," she whispered. "I'm afraid you won't remember." That line hung between them. Travis leaned in. His breath smelled like bourbon and grief. "I don't forget things that matter," he murmured. He kissed her then, sudden, clumsy, searching. And Maya, caught between fear, confusion, and loneliness, didn't pull away. Later, lying alone in the guest room she'd cleaned 100 times, Maya stared at the ceiling, her heart beating too loud. He didn't speak to her the next morning, or the next. Weeks passed. Nothing changed, until the 2 pink lines on the test. When she found the courage to tell him, she waited until the end of the day when the house was quiet, and he was alone on the back patio. He barely looked up from his phone. "I'm pregnant," she said. He paused, just a second, then returned to scrolling. "You're joking." "I'm not." He laughed under his breath, the kind of laugh that says, "You're beneath me." "Come on, Maya. You expect me to believe that?" "I haven't been with anyone else," she said. Her voice trembled, but her spine stayed straight. He stood then, towering over her, jaw tight. "You think I'm going to fall for this? You think I'll just nod and hand over a blank check? I know your type." "My type?" Desperate, calculating. You saw an opportunity and took it. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I trusted you," she said. He pulled his wallet out and tossed a business card at her feet. "My lawyer's name is on there. You want money? Talk to him. But don't ever come back here. Travis, you're dismissed." She left that night. No severance, no letter of recommendation, just the memory of a man who called her different and then treated her like trash. Back in the present, Maya sat alone in the hospital room. The baby Caleb slept peacefully in the bassinet beside her. The room smelled of antiseptic and baby powder. Outside, snow fell gently against the window pane. Her body ached. Her heart, more. She touched Caleb's cheek with the back of her fingers. He stirred slightly, his lips parting in a dreamlike sigh. She remembered every cruel word Travis had said just hours earlier. But she also remembered that half-second when he saw Caleb's eyes. His eyes. There was a fracture in his certainty. She saw it, felt it. He didn't believe her. But he wasn't sure anymore. And doubt was powerful. Maya leaned forward, pressed a kiss to her son's head. "You are not a tool," she whispered. "You are not a weapon. You are not a lie. Your truth, wrapped in soft skin and tiny fists. You are light, even if he refuses to see it. If you feel Maya's pain, give her a like and comment where you're watching from. Who knows, someone nearby might be watching this story at the same time as you." She turned toward the window and watched the snow fall into silence. Outside, somewhere far from this room, Travis Holt sat alone in the back seat of his car, staring at his reflection in the tinted glass. He couldn't stop thinking about those eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Doubt. It didn't roar, it didn't scream, it simply whispered. The storm outside had calmed, but inside Maya's small apartment in the Bronx, winter pressed in through thin walls and rattling windows. Caleb lay bundled in second-hand blankets, his tiny chest rising and falling with the fragile rhythm of sleep. Maya sat at the kitchen table with a chipped mug of tea, staring at the folded paper on the table before her. The check, $50,000. Crisp when it had first been thrown at her, now creased and soft from months of being shoved into drawers, pulled out, stared at, cursed at. She had never cashed it. To do so would have meant agreeing with Travis that Caleb was nothing but an inconvenience, a mistake to be erased. She reached for the check now, holding it between her fingers. In the dim light of the single bulb overhead, her reflection shimmered faintly in the window, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, a strength she barely recognized in her own face. Her neighbor, Mrs. Hernandez, knocked lightly before letting herself in. A widow in her 60s with a soft accent and a sharper wisdom, she often checked on Maya since Caleb's birth. She carried a pot of chicken soup, steam rising like a gentle promise. "You need to eat," Mrs. Hernandez said. She set the pot on the stove and studied Maya's tired expression. "What's wrong now, mija?" Maya held up the check. "He gave me this. Before Caleb was born. Told me to get rid of it. Told me I was lying." Mrs. Hernandez's lips tightened. "Men like him think money solves everything." "He came to the hospital," Maya whispered. Her voice cracked. "He looked right at Caleb and still said he wasn't his. But, for just a moment, he stopped. He saw something. I know he did." Mrs. Hernandez ladled soup into a bowl and set it before her. "You don't need his belief to raise your boy. You need your own." Maya swallowed hard. She reached down to touch Caleb's tiny hand where it peeked from the blanket. "I know, but how do I explain to my son, when he's older, why his father denied him?" "You explain by showing him you never did," Mrs. Hernandez said gently. "You chose him. That's enough." The words gave Maya some comfort, but the ache in her chest lingered. She thought again of Travis's face at the hospital, the flicker of recognition, quickly buried under arrogance. That flicker haunted her. Across town, Travis sat in his penthouse office, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The checkbook lay open on his desk. He had torn up the first check outside the hospital, but now he had written another, an even larger one, $100,000. His lawyer, Martin, stood across from him, arms folded. "You want this to go away? Then make it go away." "Money talks, Travis. She's a single mother. She won't resist forever." Travis rubbed his temple. "She's stubborn. She didn't take it before." "Then she's bluffing," Martin replied smoothly. "If the press finds out, we can spin it. You've always been untouchable. But if you pay her quietly, it never leaves the shadows." Travis leaned back in his chair. For the first time, the idea of untouchable felt hollow. He had built a life on control, on bending people to his will. Yet one woman, one child, had unsettled him in a way no boardroom rival ever had. He saw those eyes again, that pale skin. He remembered his father's voice. "Never let anyone see your weakness, boy. Weakness makes you pray." But was doubt weakness, or was it truth clawing to get out? He shoved the thought away. "Draft the paperwork," he muttered. The next morning, Maya opened her door to find an envelope slid under it. Inside, another check, double the first, and a typed letter. "Take this money and move on. Do not contact me again. This is the final offer." Maya crumpled the letter in her fist. Tears burned her eyes, but behind them came anger. She wasn't surprised Travis was predictable in his arrogance, but the insult cut deeper than before. He thought her silence could be bought. He thought Caleb could be erased like a mistake on a balance sheet. She carried the envelope downstairs and tossed it straight into the trash bin by the corner. Then she picked up Caleb and whispered fiercely, "You will not be his secret." Later that day, Maya returned to her part-time shift at the corner diner. The neon sign buzzed, the smell of grease clung to her uniform, and her feet ached from hours of standing. Still, she kept her head high. Caleb slept in a borrowed crib at Mrs. Hernandez's apartment, safe for the moment. As she wiped down a counter, two men at a booth whispered too loudly, "You hear about that billionaire's maid? Claiming he's the father? She's crazy. Women like that always looking for a payout." Maya's stomach twisted, but she forced herself not to react. This was her life now, judgment from strangers who knew nothing but headlines, whispers in the dark that chipped at her dignity. When her shift ended, she walked home in the falling snow. Her coat was too thin, but she pulled it tighter and kept moving. Above her, Christmas lights blinked weakly in windows. The world felt both cruel and beautiful at once. Back in his office, Travis poured himself another drink. He told himself he had done the right thing. He told himself she was lying, manipulative, dangerous to his empire. Yet when he closed his eyes, he saw Caleb's face. Not Maya's face. Not anyone else's. His own, staring back at him in miniature. He drained the glass, but the image did not fade. In the Bronx, Maya sat by Caleb's crib, humming softly. The lullaby was one her mother had sung to her, back when life was simpler, when dignity wasn't a daily battle. Caleb stirred, opened his eyes for a brief second. Storm-gray eyes. Maya smiled through her tears. "He can deny you all he wants, but truth has a way of shining through." The night settled heavy around them. Two souls, one clinging to denial, one clinging to hope, both bound by a child who carried more than blood. He carried the weight of justice yet to come. And somewhere deep inside, in the cracks of his certainty, Travis Holt carried something he could not shake, the gnawing suspicion that the life he had tried to erase was the very one that might expose who he truly was. The Bronx apartment building creaked with the weight of years. Its hallways smelled of fried onions and damp laundry, the kind of scent that clung to walls as much as memories. For Maya William, it was a refuge and a prison all at once. Every evening after her shift at the diner, she climbed 3 flights of chipped stairs, shoulders aching, hands raw from scrubbing counters, and pushed open the door to the tiny space she now called home. Inside, the silence was broken only by the soft breathing of her son, Caleb. That night, She sank into the rickety chair by his crib, her whole body heavy with exhaustion. Caleb stirred, tiny fists waving, his storm-gray eyes blinking open for a moment before fluttering shut again. Maya leaned closer, brushing her hand over his cheek. "You are my light," she whispered, "even when the world tries to snuff us out." Her phone buzzed on the table. A new message. She picked it up hesitantly. The screen glared with an unknown number, the words cold and sharp. "Cash the check. Stop the lies. This is your last warning." Maya's hands trembled. She deleted the message, tossed the phone aside, and pressed both palms against her eyes. Travis's reach was long. His lawyers, his wealth, his power, they could follow her even into this broken-down building. She felt surrounded, even when alone. The next morning, she bundled Caleb into his carrier and walked him to the community clinic 3 blocks away. The January wind cut through her coat like blades, but she kept moving. Inside the clinic, the waiting room buzzed with coughs and restless children. Posters lined the walls. Free vaccinations for kids. Support for single mothers. Dr. Harris, a black physician in his late 50s with kind eyes, greeted her with a nod. "Maya, how's our little warrior doing today?" "He's healthy," Maya said softly, but she hesitated, then let out the breath she'd been holding. "His father came to the hospital. He looked right at him and denied him, said I was a liar, and now he won't stop." Dr. Harris leaned back, studying her. "Men like that fear truth more than they fear scandal. But truth doesn't go away, Maya. It waits." "Nah, I'm scared he'll hurt us. Not physically, but he has so much power. I have nothing. You have something he doesn't," Dr. Harris said. He tapped a finger against his chest. "You have conviction. You know who your son Island. You know what's right. Don't underestimate that." She nodded, but doubt still gnawed at her. That night, after feeding Caleb and rocking him to sleep, Maya pulled out her journal. She had been writing letters to her son since the day she discovered she was pregnant. Tonight's entry spilled out raw and unfiltered. "Your father is powerful, but his heart is weak. He doesn't see you, not yet. But I will fight, so that one day, you will never question your worth." Across the city, in a glass tower overlooking the East River, Travis Holt stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, drink in hand. The skyline glittered beneath him. He should have felt invincible, as always. But something inside refused to quiet. He kept seeing that baby's face. Those eyes. His eyes. Martin, his lawyer, sat on the leather sofa scrolling through his tablet. "The woman's stubborn. She hasn't cashed either check. If she keeps pushing, we'll need to make her look unstable. A smear campaign. People will believe what we tell them." Travis's jaw tightened. "And if she goes to the press, we bury her," Martin replied smoothly. "Discredit her. A single mother from the Bronx? Against you? She doesn't stand a chance." Travis didn't answer. He turned back to the window, but his reflection stared at him harder than the skyline did. He remembered his father's voice again. "Weakness will destroy you. Deny it before it denies you." But what if the weakness wasn't doubt? What if it was the denial itself? The following week, Maya was back at the diner, pouring coffee for truckers and night shift nurses. The air smelled of bacon grease and burnt toast. She moved quickly, balancing plates, keeping her smile polite even as exhaustion clung to her bones. At one booth, 2 men laughed too loudly. "That's the girl," one said, nodding toward her. "The one who says the billionaire's her baby daddy." "Figures," the other sneered. "All the same story. Get knocked up, point fingers, hope for a payout." Heat burned behind Maya's eyes, but she didn't let them see. She carried their plates to the table, set them down with steady hands, and walked away. Behind her, their laughter stung like acid. Back in the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, closing her eyes for a moment. "God, give me strength," she whispered. Her manager, a wiry man with thinning hair, barked orders from across the room. "Maya, breaks over, table 7's waiting." She straightened, swallowed her pain, and went back out. Later, as snow began to fall again, she pushed Caleb's stroller down the cracked sidewalks of the Bronx. Lights flickered in apartment windows. Somewhere, A radio played an old soul song. The melody drifted around her, reminding her of her mother, long gone but never forgotten. She stopped at the corner bodega for milk. Behind her in line, a woman whispered to another, "That's her. The liar. Poor kid. Growing up without a father." Maya's hands tightened on the stroller handle. She said nothing, paid for the milk, and walked out into the cold. Back in her apartment, she laid Caleb in his crib and sat beside him, tears finally spilling down her face. "They don't know you," she whispered. "They don't know me, but one day, they will." She pressed her palm gently over his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "You are my truth, and truth doesn't die." Across the city, Travis sat alone again. The second check had come back torn, slipped into his office mailbox with no note. He stared at the pieces on his desk, the inked numbers shredded. For the first time, he wondered if money really could fail him. And in the silence of his penthouse, he admitted something he would never speak aloud. He wasn't certain anymore. The doubt had grown louder, and in the Bronx, a woman who had been called a liar, a leech, and worse, rocked her son gently in the glow of a single lamp, holding fast to the belief that doubt even in a man like Travis Holt was the first crack in the walls of denial. And cracks, she knew, could spread. The first Sunday of February dawned gray over the Bronx. The streets were damp from last night's sleet, littered with newspapers that clung to the curbs like discarded confessions. Maya pushed Caleb's stroller slowly toward the small brick church at the corner of 147th Street. She wasn't sure why she was going there. She hadn't set foot inside a church in years, but something in her chest ached for refuge, for words stronger than the whispers of neighbors or the taunts of strangers at the diner. Inside, the sanctuary was warm, lit by soft golden lamps and the faint glow of stained glass windows. The congregation was small but alive, elderly women in bright hats, children fidgeting in the pews, men nodding to the rhythm of the choir. Maya slid quietly into the back row, rocking Caleb gently as the pastor spoke. After the service, as people mingled and shared greetings, an older woman approached. She was tall, with skin like polished mahogany, and eyes that carried decades of storms weathered and survived. She wore a simple gray coat and carried herself with the kind of dignity that did not need wealth to shine. "You're Maya," the woman said, her voice both question and statement. Maya blinked. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," the woman replied, a small smile curving her lips. "Name's Loretta Johnson. I run the food pantry down on 149th. I heard your story truth has a way of traveling, even when people twist it." Maya stiffened, bracing for judgment, but Loretta's eyes softened as she looked down at Caleb, who cooed in his stroller. "He's got eyes like a storm rolling in," Loretta murmured. "I've seen that color before. Rare, strong, can't be hidden." Maya swallowed hard. She wanted to believe those words meant something, but she had learned to expect doubt, not affirmation. "People say I'm lying," she whispered. "They say I'm trying to trap him." Loretta's gaze sharpened. "Let them say what they will. The truth don't need their permission. The truth stands, even when men with money try to bury it." Maya lowered her head. "I don't know how to keep standing." Loretta reached out, placing a weathered hand over Maya's. "You stand because your boy needs you to. You stand because every woman before you who was told she was nothing refused to stay down. Don't you see? You're not just fighting for him. You're fighting for yourself." The words settled deep into Maya's chest, heavy yet strangely freeing. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen not as a liar, not as a scandal, but as a mother doing her best in a world designed to break her. That evening, Maya visited the food pantry Loretta ran. The shelves were lined with cans, the walls with photographs of families helped over the years. Loretta introduced her to volunteers, to other mothers, to neighbors who smiled at Caleb without judgment. For a moment, the weight on Maya's shoulders eased. "You're not alone," Loretta said firmly, as if she could read the doubt still clouding Maya's mind. "Remember that." Meanwhile, across town, Travis Holt's life spun in a different orbit. He sat in a private dining room of a Manhattan steakhouse, surrounded by investors and politicians, his laughter rehearsed, his wine glass always half full. On the surface, he looked untouchable, but beneath the table, His foot tapped restlessly. He heard Loretta's words in his head, though he had never met her. Only the echo of what Maya had whispered at the hospital. "He has your eyes." He replayed the image of the baby in his mind. Those storm gray eyes had followed him into every boardroom, every elevator, every empty penthouse night since. At one point, an investor leaned across the table. "Travis, you look distracted. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Travis lied. He smiled that perfected smile, the one that hid cracks like paint over rotting wood. But when he returned home, the mask slipped. He poured whiskey into a glass and sat alone, staring at the skyline. The city lights glittered, yet none of them eased the shadow in his chest. He had built his empire on certainty. Now, for the first time, he wasn't certain of anything. Back in the Bronx, Maya wrote in her journal after putting Caleb to sleep. She wrote about Loretta's words, about the strength she hadn't known she carried, about the fire that was starting to burn again inside her. "You are not a mistake," she wrote to Caleb. "You are not shame. You are my truth. And one day, your father will see it too, whether he wants to or not." Days turned into weeks. Maya worked double shifts, her body aching but her spirit steadier. Loretta checked in often, bringing meals, reminding her to rest, reminding her that dignity was not something a billionaire could erase. One evening, as Maya walked home, a group of teenagers on the corner sneered. "There's the liar," one muttered. "Baby mama of the rich man." Another laughed. "Bet she's just after his wallet." Maya's steps faltered, but she didn't stop. She kept walking, her head high, Loretta's words echoing. The truth don't need their permission. At home, she held Caleb close, pressing her cheek against his soft hair. "One day," she whispered, "you'll know how hard I fought to protect you. You'll know the truth no matter what anyone says." And though her body trembled with weariness, her heart beat steady with resolve. Across the river, Travis stood again in front of his mirror. He stared at his own eyes, storm gray and unyielding. Then he saw Caleb's face flash across his mind like a ghost, carrying the same gaze. He poured another drink, but this time it didn't wash the vision away. And as the city settled into night, two lives moved in parallel, one clinging to power, the other clinging to hope, both bound by a child whose existence would soon force their worlds to collide again. The March wind cut sharp across the Bronx, carrying with it the metallic scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Inside the small apartment, Maya sat in the rocking chair that Mrs. Hernandez had rescued from a thrift store and insisted she keep. Caleb lay nestled against her chest, warm and steady, his soft breath rising and falling in a rhythm that made the world feel bearable. Maya hummed a tune her mother used to sing, though her own voice cracked from exhaustion. She closed her eyes and let the melody carry her back to the moment she first held him, back to the silence of the delivery room, when the nurses had stepped aside, and she had heard only his cry, sharp and strong, breaking the air like lightning through storm clouds. She remembered the way the doctor had placed him in her arms. He was tiny, impossibly fragile, yet in that instant she had felt an anchor drop inside her soul. Nothing could sever the bond. She had whispered into his ear, "You are not a mistake. You are my miracle." Her tears had fallen onto his cheeks, but he had not cried. He had stared up at her, his gray eyes wide, already carrying more truth than any man dared admit. Now, weeks later, she studied those same eyes as they blinked open and caught the faint glow of the lamp. She thought of Travis, how he had looked at Caleb and faltered, how denial had surged back to the surface like a reflex. That flicker of doubt in him had been real. She clung to it, even though she hated herself for needing any piece of him at all. The knock at the door startled her. Maya rose carefully, laying Caleb in his crib, and opened the door to find Loretta standing there with a basket. "Thought you might need these," Loretta said, stepping inside. "Diapers, formula, a couple cans of soup. Donations from the pantry." Maya blinked back tears. "You've already done so much for me." "Oh, and I'll keep doing it," Loretta replied firmly. "Community don't end when the church service does. You understand?" Maya nodded. She wanted to believe it, to accept the kindness without guilt. But the pride that lived in her chest made the acceptance heavy. As Loretta held Caleb, cooing at him, Maya confessed quietly, Sometimes I still hear his words in my head, the way he called me a liar, the way everyone whispers behind my back. Loretta looked up, her gaze sharp. Let them whisper. Their words don't raise this boy. You do. Their words don't decide his future. You will. Maya felt her throat tighten. She wished her mother were alive to say those things, to remind her she was more than the insults, more than the shame cast on her by the rich man who had used her and walked away. But maybe, just maybe, Loretta was filling that space now. That night, after Loretta left, Maya sat with her journal. The pages were filled with letters to Caleb, each one a piece of her heart inked onto paper. Tonight, her pen moved slower, heavier. You were born in silence, but the truth was loud inside me. Your father looked at you and denied you, but one day he will not be able to deny what God has written in your eyes. You are my strength when I have none. You are the proof that even in betrayal, life can bloom. She closed the journal and kissed the sleeping boy's forehead. One day, she whispered, he'll see you the way I do, even if it breaks him. Across the river, Travis sat in his penthouse, alone with a glass of whiskey. The city lights blinked below, but he couldn't focus on them. His lawyer's words echoed in his ears. Discredit her. End this now before it spreads. But another voice rose, softer yet more insistent, the voice of doubt. The image of the baby haunted him, gray eyes cutting through the armor of arrogance he wore like a second skin. He slammed the glass down on the counter, shattering it. The whiskey spread like a stain across the marble. For a long time he stared at it, breathing hard, then whispered into the empty room, "Why can't I stop seeing him?" He thought of his own father, a stern man who had never let him show weakness, who had once told him after a mistake, "You will never be allowed to be ordinary. Don't forget it." That demand had forged Travis into the ruthless man he was, but now he wondered if it had also hollowed him out. He rose, grabbed his coat, and paced the penthouse floor as if walking could silence the questions. But no matter how far he walked, the storm-gray eyes followed him. Meanwhile, Maya faced storms of her own. The gossip in the diner grew sharper each week. Customers whispered within earshot. A fellow waitress muttered, "She's only here until she gets his money." Even some neighbors in the building looked at her differently, as if Caleb's very existence was a scandal. One evening, leaving work with her coat buttoned tight against the cold, Maya overheard two men laughing outside. "Did you hear about Holt's maid? Claims her baby's his. Guy like him? He wouldn't touch someone like her. She's desperate." The words struck, but Maya kept walking, clutching the stroller handle tighter as Caleb slept beneath his blanket. She had learned not to fight with words. Her fight was survival. Her weapon, the unshakable love she carried for her son. Back home, she looked at Caleb, tiny chest rising and falling, and whispered, "The world may deny you. He may deny you. But I never will." That night, as the city hummed with distant sirens and muffled arguments, Maya knew she had reached a turning point. She could no longer hope Travis would change on his own. If justice was ever going to come, she would have to be the one to bring it into the light. She kissed Caleb's forehead again and said, "You were born in silence. But I promise, my son, your truth will not stay silent forever." And as Travis poured himself another drink across town, staring into the city lights and fighting the storm inside him, the first seeds of that truth were already beginning to take root. Spring in the Bronx brought no blossoms of ease for Maya. The streets were still bruised from winter, gray slush clinging to the curbs, the scent of exhaust heavy in the air. Yet inside her small apartment, life pulsed warm and steady. Caleb had learned to smile, a crooked little grin that stretched wide whenever Maya leaned over his crib. His laugh, light and sudden, was the kind of sound that stitched cracks in her weary heart. One Saturday morning, sunlight broke through the dusty window as Maya dressed Caleb in a clean onesie. She lifted him up and kissed his cheek, savoring the simple joy. Just then, Mrs. Hernandez knocked on the door and stepped inside, carrying a bag of groceries from the bodega. "Look at you, big boy," the older woman cooed, reaching for Caleb. "You're growing so fast." Maya smiled, grateful for the support. While Mrs. Hernandez held Caleb, she pulled out her phone. The sight of them together made her pause. On instinct, she lifted the phone and snapped a photo. Caleb's storm-gray eyes sparkled in the morning light. his small fist curled tight against his grandmotherly neighbor's shoulder. She didn't plan to share it, but when Loretta called later to check in, Maya sent her the picture with a short message. "He's doing well today. Thank you for everything." Loretta, proud, showed the photo to one of the pantry volunteers, who in turn posted it on a small community page online. Within hours, the image began to spread, shared among neighbors, friends, and eventually strangers. No one knew the child's last name, but the comments poured in. "Beautiful boy. Look at those eyes. He's special." The next morning, Travis scrolled absently through his phone while his driver ferried him to a meeting. His thumb stopped mid-swipe. There, buried in a trending thread, was the photograph. Caleb, smiling in the sunlight, his eyes like shards of stormy glass. Travis's chest tightened. The resemblance was unmistakable. He had seen those eyes staring back at him in the mirror his entire life. He zoomed in, staring until the edges of the screen blurred. "Sir?" the driver asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Everything all right?" Travis shoved the phone into his pocket. "Just drive." But nothing felt all right. That evening, instead of celebrating another successful deal with investors, Travis found himself pouring a drink in silence, staring again at the photograph. Doubt wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a shout that refused to be silenced. He remembered his father, stern and unyielding, demanding perfection. "Weakness makes you pray." The memory tangled with the sight of the boy's face, his son's face. Travis slammed the glass down. He couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Maya returned home from her shift at the diner, unaware of the storm she had unintentionally unleashed. She fed Caleb, rocked him, and whispered stories about the future, about schools, playgrounds, summers filled with laughter. She dreamed aloud, even as fatigue pulled at her bones. Her phone buzzed with messages. Friends she hadn't heard from in years reached out. "Is this your baby? He's beautiful." Some congratulated her. Others pried with curiosity. A few comments carried venom. "Trying to get attention? You know everyone's talking about you, right?" Maya ignored them all. She focused on Caleb's steady breathing, the way his small fingers wrapped around hers with trust. But Travis did not ignore the photo. The next day, he appeared unannounced at the clinic, where Maya sometimes volunteered with Loretta, hoping to give back in small ways. She was in the supply room when she heard the commotion outside, hushed voices, the sound of someone insisting. When she stepped out, her heart stopped. Travis stood in the waiting area, flanked by 2 security aides. His eyes swept the room, cold and searching. "Maya," he said, his voice low, heavy with command. The room went silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward them. Loretta stepped forward, protective, but Maya raised a hand to stop her. "What are you doing here?" Maya asked. Travis's gaze flicked toward the stroller beside her, where Caleb sat awake, wide-eyed and curious. Their eyes met the father and the son, and Travis faltered for just a second. He quickly masked it. "I saw the photo. You need to stop putting him online." "I didn't put him anywhere," Maya snapped. "But why does it matter to you, if he isn't yours?" The question hung heavy. Travis's jaw clenched. He looked around, aware of the audience. "Because lies spread fast. You're trying to destroy me." Maya stepped closer, her voice firm but shaking with rage. "Destroy you? You did that yourself. You walked away. You denied him." Travis's aides shifted, but he lifted a hand to silence them. His eyes were locked on Caleb, who stared back with storm-gray certainty. The silence stretched until it hurt. Finally, Travis muttered, "This isn't over." He turned and left, the echo of his footsteps sharp against the clinic floor. Loretta came to Maya's side, her hand steady on her shoulder. "Child, you rattled him. Did you see it?" He looked at that boy and couldn't hide it. Maya exhaled, trembling, but he still left. "He left with doubt in his pocket," Loretta said, "and doubt, when planted in stone, can crack it wide open." That night, Maya lay awake listening to Caleb's breathing. She replayed every second of the confrontation. The way Travis had looked at him. The pause. The hesitation. She clung to it, even as fear coiled tighter around her chest. Across the city, in his penthouse, Travis sat in darkness, staring at the same photograph on his phone. He zoomed in again and again, studying the boy's face until the lines blurred into his own. He tried to drown the truth in whiskey. But the storm in the child's eyes would not leave him. For the first time in years, Travis Holt didn't feel powerful. He felt hunted not by scandal, but by truth. And somewhere deep inside, he knew. No amount of money, denial, or distance would keep it from finding him. The night after the clinic confrontation, Travis lay awake in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling. The city sprawled beneath him, a blanket of lights and noise, yet he felt utterly alone. He poured another glass of whiskey, but left it untouched on the nightstand. No drink could silence the image burned into his mind, Caleb's storm-gray eyes, his own eyes, his father's eyes. He rose from bed and walked barefoot across the cold marble floor into his private study. On the wall hung an old black and white photograph of his father, taken decades earlier. A stern man in a tailored suit, eyes sharp, mouth unforgiving. The resemblance between those eyes and Caleb's was undeniable. "Damn it," Travis muttered, tearing his gaze away. He splashed water on his face in the adjoining bathroom, gripping the counter until his knuckles whitened. In the mirror, he saw not himself but echoes the boy who had grown up under those unforgiving eyes, the boy told never to falter, never to show weakness. And now, a child born of a mistake threatening to unravel everything he had built. The next morning, Martin, his lawyer, arrived at the penthouse. "We need to control the narrative," Martin said briskly, dropping a folder on the desk. "If this continues, rumors will multiply. I recommend a smear campaign against her. Question her credibility. Paint her as unstable." Travis frowned, flipping through the documents, articles drafted, background checks, even photographs from Maya's diner job. "You want me to ruin her?" Martin shrugged. "Better her than you. This is about protecting your legacy." Travis stared at him, jaw tight. Legacy. The word echoed hollowly. He had spent decades building an empire, crushing rivals, commanding headlines, but when he closed his eyes, all he saw was a baby's gaze, honest, unyielding, his blood staring back at him. "Not yet," Travis said finally, pushing the folder back. "Give me time." Martin looked surprised. "Time for what?" Travis didn't answer. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, Maya sat at the small kitchen table writing another letter in her journal. Caleb napped in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling. She wrote fiercely, the words spilling as though they had been waiting at the edge of her pen. "Your father looked at you yesterday. He tried to hide it, but I saw the doubt. I saw the truth creeping in. One day, he won't be able to walk away." Later, she tucked the journal back under the mattress and bundled Caleb for a walk. The streets hummed with life vendors calling out, buses hissing at stops, children chasing each other down cracked sidewalks. Neighbors still whispered, but Maya had learned to keep her chin lifted. She had Loretta's voice in her mind. The truth doesn't need permission. At the church pantry that afternoon, Loretta noticed the determination in Maya's face. "Something changed," she observed. He looked at Caleb. Maya replied softly. "He couldn't deny him, not completely. I know he'll fight it. But I saw it." "He knows." Loretta nodded slowly. "Doubt in a man like him is dangerous. But it's also a crack in the armor. Don't let him scare you into silence." That evening, Travis returned from a meeting and found himself pacing his office instead of reviewing quarterly reports. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old family album, something he hadn't touched in years. Leafing through the pages, he stopped at a photograph of himself at age 2. Same gray eyes, same pale skin. The resemblance to Caleb was chilling. He slammed the album shut and shoved it back into the drawer. Yet the image lingered, chasing him down the corridors of memory. He recalled the night of the gala, the bourbon on his tongue, the loneliness gnawing at him. He remembered calling Maya different, confessing emptiness he never admitted to anyone else. He had used her, yes, but he had also revealed more of himself than he ever intended. That contradiction unsettled him more than the possibility of fatherhood. For the first time in years, Travis Holt felt haunted not by scandal or rivals, but by a truth he couldn't escape. 2 nights later, he drove himself to the Bronx, alone, without his aides or security detail. The car rolled slowly past the row of crumbling buildings, past the flickering street lamps and graffiti-stained walls. He parked across from Maya's apartment building and sat in silence, watching the windows glow faintly with life. He imagined Caleb inside, being rocked to sleep by lullabies Travis had never known, held with a tenderness Travis had never received from his own father. He gripped the steering wheel, torn between impulse and fear. Part of him wanted to knock on her door, to see his son again, to face what he had denied, but another part, the louder part, snarled at him to leave before weakness consumed him. In the end, he drove away, tires hissing over wet pavement, but as he merged back onto the highway, he realized he wasn't leaving the truth behind. He was carrying it with him, lodged like a stone in his chest. Back upstairs in her apartment, Maya sensed nothing of the car that had idled on her street. She sat by the crib, stroking Caleb's hair, whispering promises into the quiet. "You'll never feel unwanted," she said. "Not as long as I'm here." Caleb stirred, his storm-gray eyes opening briefly. They locked on hers, clear and steady, as if he understood. Maya smiled through her exhaustion. "The world may deny you, he may deny you, but I never will, and one day, the truth will be too loud for him to ignore." Across the city, Travis stood again before his mirror, staring into his own eyes. For the first time, he admitted something, if only in silence. He was afraid. Afraid of losing control, afraid of facing himself, afraid of what his son's existence revealed about the man he had become. The whiskey sat untouched. The city lights blurred. And in the reflection staring back at him, he saw not power, not legacy, but the ghost of a boy he could no longer deny. The following week, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, but for Travis Holt, everything felt offbeat. He sat in the glass conference room of his company headquarters, surrounded by board members, analysts, and lawyers. They discussed expansion projects and stock performance. Yet his mind drifted. The polished charts and projected profits blurred, replaced by the memory of a boy's gray eyes staring straight through him. "Travis?" one of the board members prompted. "Your thoughts on the Brazil deal?" He cleared his throat, straightened his tie. "Move forward," he muttered, though the words carried no conviction. His reputation as a visionary, decisive and ruthless, was cracking. People around the table exchanged subtle glances, but no one dared question him aloud. Later, in the solitude of his penthouse, he poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. Instead, he walked to the balcony, the city buzzing beneath him like a restless hive. He leaned against the rail and whispered into the night, "What am I doing?" The question was not for shareholders or lawyers, but for himself, and it had no answer. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, Maya noticed the change too, though from her side of the glass. It looked like shadows lengthening. She heard whispers that Travis had been distracted at meetings, that his sharpness was dulled. She couldn't confirm the rumors, but she felt in her bones that the truth was beginning to wear him down. At the diner one evening, a woman in a business suit approached her. "You're Maya, aren't you?" the stranger asked. Maya tensed. "Who's asking?" The woman slid a card across the counter. "Journalist. People are talking about Holt. If you're ready to tell your story, I'll listen." Maya froze. Her heart raced. For months she had dreamed of shouting her truth, but fear had always tethered her. She looked down at Caleb's photo taped inside her order pad. He smiled back at her with storm-gray certainty. "Not yet," Maya whispered, pushing the card back, "but maybe soon." That night, she told Loretta about the encounter. The older woman listened with patience, her wise eyes steady. "The truth has legs, child. It walks with or without you. The question is, will you guide it, or let others twist it?" Maya sat in silence, the weight of the decision pressing on her. Across town, Travis sat in his private gym, pounding fists into a leather bag until his knuckles burned. His trainer had left hours ago, but he kept swinging, sweat dripping into his eyes, muscles screaming. Each punch carried rage. He couldn't name rage at Maya, at himself, at the mirror that showed him a man unraveling. Finally, he collapsed onto the bench, chest heaving. He saw again the photograph that had spread online, the storm-gray eyes unblinking. He muttered, "You're not mine," but the words lacked power. He thought of calling Martin, of unleashing the smear campaign, of silencing Maya once and for all, but he hesitated. Every tactic felt like building a wall around a truth that would eventually seep through the cracks. Days later, Maya walked Caleb to the park. The early spring air carried a hint of warmth. Children chasing soccer balls across muddy grass. She sat on a worn bench, watching Caleb clutch at her necklace with tiny fingers. She whispered promises to him, promises of schools, stories, a future free of shame. From across the park, a man in a dark coat watched. Travis. He had come without security, standing half-hidden near a lamppost. He hadn't planned it, but he couldn't stay away. His chest ached as he saw the boy laugh, the same crooked grin Travis himself had worn as a child. Maya noticed him after a moment, their eyes locked. For a long beat, the world seemed to hush. She didn't rise, didn't shout. She simply held Caleb tighter, daring him to look away again. Travis's throat tightened. He turned, disappearing into the city before she could call his name. But as he walked, he knew he hadn't escaped. He had seen too much. That night, Maya wrote another journal entry. He was there. He watched you laugh, Caleb. He didn't speak, but he saw. He can run from us, but not from what's in his blood. One day, he'll have to face it. And in his penthouse, Travis stared into the mirror again, fists clenched. For the first time in his life, the fortress of denial he had built so carefully no longer felt indestructible. The cracks were spreading, and through them, truth shone like a light he could no longer blind himself to. He whispered, almost against his will, "My son." The words lingered in the empty room, fragile yet undeniable, a confession he wasn't ready for anyone to hear, but one he could no longer silence within himself. Rain drummed against the glass walls of Travis Holt's penthouse, streaking the skyline in blurred rivers of gray. He sat at the edge of his leather sofa, elbows on his knees, staring at the untouched glass of whiskey on the table. The city below thrummed with its usual chaos horns, sirens, the restless beat of ambition, but inside the penthouse, silence pressed in heavy. He whispered the words he had dared speak only once in private. "My son." The sound startled him, as though someone else had spoken. He rubbed his face with both hands, pacing the room like a man cornered. For years he had lived untouchable, his power shielded by money and reputation, but now a child's eyes had pierced through, cracking open the armor he had forged since boyhood. Martin's voice from their last meeting replayed in his head. Discredit her. End this, before it spreads. That was the logical path. The path his father would have demanded. Control the story, bury the woman, erase the problem. Yet every time Travis pictured signing off on that plan, he saw Caleb's smile, crooked, innocent, undeniable. Across the Bronx, Maya listened to the storm from her small apartment. Caleb slept soundly in his crib, lulled by the rain's rhythm. She sat at the table, Loretta's words echoing, "The truth doesn't need permission." On the counter sat the journalist's card she had refused weeks earlier. She traced its edges with trembling fingers. Her fear warred with her fury. She had survived shame, gossip, exhaustion, but what if Travis moved to destroy her completely? He had the money, the connections, the media clout. One false headline, and she could lose everything: her job, her dignity, maybe even her son's future. Yet another voice pushed against the fear. If you stay silent, he wins. The next Sunday, Maya met Loretta at the church pantry. The older woman noticed the card in her hand. Still wrestling with it? Maya nodded. If I speak, he'll come after me. If I stay quiet, I'm complicit in his denial. I don't know what's right anymore. Loretta squeezed her shoulder. Right and easy rarely walk together. You already know the truth. The question is, do you have the courage to let others see it? That night, Maya drafted an email to the journalist. Her finger hovered over send. She looked at Caleb, stirring softly in his crib, and pressed it. Meanwhile, Travis sat in his office overlooking the East River, documents spread before him. He tried to drown himself in numbers and contracts, but his phone buzzed. A notification. An online article. His heart dropped as he read the headline, Single mother claims billionaire Travis Holt fathered her child. The photograph of Caleb filled the screen, those storm gray eyes, that unmistakable grin. The article detailed Maya's background, her work as a maid in his estate. The night she said everything changed. Travis' pulse pounded, rage surged, but underneath it, fear. The story was out now. No smear campaign could erase what people had already seen. Within hours, his office phone rang non-stop. Board members demanded answers. Investors threatened to pull out. His lawyer barked about defamation suits, but all Travis could see was the boy's face plastered across every news feed. He left the building without speaking to anyone, ignoring the rain that soaked his tailored suit. He drove aimlessly until he found himself outside Maya's apartment building again. The neon sign of the corner bodega flickered across the wet pavement. He didn't go in. He sat in the car, staring at the glowing windows, his chest tight. For the first time in decades, Travis Holt, master of every room, felt powerless. Inside, Maya held Caleb close as her phone buzzed endlessly. Some messages were supportive. "You're brave. We believe you." Others cut like knives. "Gold digger. Liar." She turned the phone face down and kissed her son's head. "They don't matter," she whispered. "What matters is you." But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, cameras swarmed outside Travis's corporate headquarters. Reporters shouted questions as he strode past, face stone hard. "Mr. Holt, is it true? Is Caleb your son? Did you pay off the mother to keep quiet? Why deny him?" He said nothing. Silence was his shield. But silence was also admission. Every flash of a camera felt like another crack in his fortress. Back in the Bronx, Maya faced her own storm. Neighbors gossiped louder. Customers at the diner whispered openly now. But she held her head higher than before. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was fighting. Loretta visited that evening, bringing soup and steady wisdom. "You lit a fire, child. Fires spread fast. Be ready." Maya nodded, exhaustion etched in her face, but her eyes steady. "I'm not afraid anymore." He saw Caleb. The world will see him too. That's enough. Across town, Travis stood once more before his mirror. His reflection looked back, not as the billionaire titan, but as a man cornered by his own lies. Behind his eyes flickered the truth he could no longer outrun. "My son," he whispered again, the words heavier now, carrying both fear and inevitability. And as the city buzzed with scandal, two worlds moved closer to collision. One built on denial, the other on unyielding love. The storm was no longer coming, it was here, and neither Travis nor Maya could escape its weight. The scandal hit harder than Travis Holt expected. By midweek, his name trended across every platform, the photograph of Caleb's eyes becoming an emblem of whispered truth. The media swarmed, reporters camped outside his office, outside his penthouse, even following him to his private gym. Headlines blared. "Billionaire denies child with former maid." Storm. Gray eyes raise questions. The fall of an untouchable titan? Inside the penthouse, the walls felt closer than ever. Travis slammed the television remote against the coffee table, shattering the casing. The screen froze on an image of Maya carrying Caleb through the rain, her chin high, her eyes defiant despite exhaustion. Something in that image pierced him deeper than the articles. She looked stronger than he remembered, no longer the maid who lowered her eyes when he barked orders. She looked unbreakable. Martin arrived with a folder under his arm, his tone sharp. "We can still control this. File a defamation lawsuit. Demand a DNA test on your terms. Discredit her through the press. If we push hard enough, she'll fold." Travis rubbed his temple. "And if the test proves what I already know?" Martin hesitated. "Then we bury the result. With enough money, truth bends." Travis's eyes hardened. "Truth doesn't bend. Not this one." Martin frowned. "You're letting sentiment cloud judgment. Think of your empire, your investors." "My empire is crumbling anyway," Travis snapped, cutting him off. "Maybe it's time I stop pretending I can control everything." For a moment, Martin looked at him as though he didn't recognize the man before him. Then he gathered his folder and left, muttering, "Weakness never ends well." 0. That night, Travis sat in the dark study with the old photograph of his father on the wall. The man's cold eyes stared down, demanding strength, demanding denial. For the first time, Travis whispered back, "You were wrong." In the Bronx, Maya faced her own siege. Paparazzi lurked outside the diner. Strangers shouted questions when she pushed Caleb's stroller down the street. Some offered sympathy, but others hurled cruel words. "Liar," one man shouted. "Gold digger," another spat. Each insult cut, but Maya kept walking, shoulders squared. Inside, though, fear twisted her gut. She worried not for herself but for Caleb, what scars these years might leave on him, what shadows he might carry because of his father's denial. One evening, Loretta visited with groceries and steady presence. Maya admitted, "I don't know how much more I can take. Every day feels like a battle." Loretta touched her arm. "Child, battles are fought for what matters most, and what matters is right there in that crib. Don't let the noise make you forget." Maya looked at Caleb, sleeping peacefully, his tiny fists curled. She nodded, tears blurring her vision. "You're right. I'll fight for him until I have nothing left." 2 days later, the battle shifted. A subpoena arrived at Maya's door. Travis had filed for a court-ordered DNA test. She held the papers in trembling hands, rage and relief mingling. On one hand, it was another attempt to control her. On the other, it was a path to undeniable truth. She called Loretta immediately. "He's forcing a test." "Then let him," Loretta replied calmly. "Truth don't fear light." Maya pressed the papers to her chest, whispering to Caleb, "This is it, my love. They'll all see." Across the city, Travis prepared for the same test, his mind a storm. In his heart, he already knew the answer, but fear gnawed at him, fear not of fatherhood, but of the man he had been. To admit Caleb was his son meant confronting the lies he had built his life upon. It meant facing the night he used Maya and walked away. On the day of the appointment, Maya arrived at the clinic first, Caleb in her arms. She wore her plainest coat, her hair pulled back, determined not to give the cameras waiting outside any glamour to twist. Reporters shouted questions, flashbulbs blinding her as she hurried inside. Minutes later, Travis arrived through a separate entrance, flanked by aides. He looked tired, older than his years, the weight of scandal pressing down. When he entered the waiting room, silence fell. His gaze locked on Maya across the room. For a long moment, neither spoke. Caleb stirred in Maya's arms, blinking awake. His storm-gray eyes met Travis's, and the air grew thick. Travis's throat tightened. Every excuse, every denial, every cruel word he had hurled at Maya crumbled in that instant. The nurse called them in. The test was quick, clinical, a swab inside Caleb's cheek, another from Travis, but the weight of it felt monumental. Each sample sealed was another brick in the wall closing around the truth. Afterward, as they stood outside the clinic under a cloudy sky, reporters swarmed. "Mr. Holt, do you admit he's your son?" "Maya, what do you hope to gain from this?" Travis said nothing. But he didn't walk away immediately. He glanced at Caleb once more, his eyes softening before he turned and entered his car. The flicker of humanity didn't escape the cameras. By evening, the photograph of Travis looking at Caleb, vulnerable for the first time, flooded the internet. In the Bronx that night, Maya held her son close and whispered, "It's only a matter of time now. Truth is louder than lies." And in his penthouse, Travis poured out his untouched whiskey, staring at the skyline. For the first time, he wasn't drowning his doubt, he was bracing himself for the tidal wave of truth he knew was coming. The results would arrive in days, but the verdict was already written in the storm-gray eyes of a child. The morning the envelope arrived, the Bronx air was heavy with spring rain. Maya heard the thud of mail slipping through the slot and froze where she stood in the kitchen, spoon paused over Caleb's cereal bowl. For weeks, her life had been a storm of reporters, whispers, and waiting. Now the storm had delivered its answer. She walked slowly to the door, heart pounding. The envelope bore the clinic's seal. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Words swam on the page, but one line cut through everything. Probability of paternity. 99.99%. Her breath caught. She pressed the paper to her chest, tears spilling freely. "It's over," she whispered, looking toward Caleb, who banged his little spoon against the high chair tray. "They can't deny you anymore." She lifted him, kissing his cheek as her tears wet his soft skin. "The truth is yours now." By noon, the results had leaked. News anchors interrupted programming. Headlines flashed across screens, and social media erupted. DNA test confirms. Billionaire Travis Holt is father of Bronx child. The photo of Caleb's storm-gray eyes ran alongside every report. At the penthouse, Travis sat in his study when Martin burst in, phone in hand. "It's out. It's everywhere. We'll need to do damage control. Immediately statements, interviews, settlements." Travis held up a hand. His face was pale, drawn, but his voice was steady. "Stop," Martin blinked. "Stop? Do you have any idea what this means? Your investors, your board?" "I know exactly what it means," Travis interrupted, standing slowly. He walked to the window, staring at the rain streaking the skyline. "It means he's mine, and I can't run from that anymore." For the first time, Martin was speechless. Travis turned, his expression heavy with something the lawyer had never seen in him before: resolve, not arrogance. "Draft whatever statements you want, but make sure they tell the truth. No more lies." Across the city, Maya's phone buzzed endlessly with calls and messages. Some were from reporters, others from strangers offering both support and venom. She ignored them all, focusing only on Loretta's voice on the other end of the line. "You did it, child," Loretta said softly. The truth stood tall. "It's not about me," Maya replied, her voice breaking. "It's about Caleb. He'll grow up knowing he was never a mistake." That evening, Maya stood at her apartment window, Caleb in her arms, watching the flashing lights of news vans outside. It felt surreal, overwhelming, but inside her chest there was peace. For the first time since this ordeal began, the weight of doubt had lifted. Travis, meanwhile, sat alone in his penthouse with the result envelope open on the table before him. He read the line again and again. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. There was no escape, no denial. Caleb was his blood, his son. Memories assaulted him the night at the gala, the loneliness that drove him into Maya's arms, the cruel words he hurled at her afterward, the checks he shoved into her hands. Shame burned in him, but so did something deeper, a longing he had never admitted. A longing to rewrite what had been broken in his own childhood, to give his son something different from the coldness he had endured. But did he deserve that chance? Could he step into Caleb's life after denying him so publicly, so viciously? He poured a glass of whiskey, then set it down untouched. He picked up his phone instead and stared at Maya's number. His thumb hovered, but he couldn't press dial. Not yet. He wasn't ready for her. Voice wasn't ready to face the weight of what he had done. In the Bronx, neighbors began to shift. Those who had whispered cruelly now watched with uneasy curiosity. Some offered awkward apologies in the hallway, muttering, "Guess you were telling the truth." Maya met their words with polite nods but little else. Their validation no longer mattered. One night, as she rocked Caleb to sleep, she whispered, "The world knows now. But you don't need the world, you have me. That's enough." Still, in her heart, she knew the story wasn't finished. Truth had been revealed, but justice and healing were still far away. The next morning, Travis held a press conference. Cameras flashed wildly as he stepped up to the podium, suit immaculate, face grave. For once, his usual confidence seemed subdued. He took a deep breath and spoke. "The DNA results have confirmed what many suspected. I am the father of Caleb William." His voice faltered on the name, but he pressed on. "For too long, I denied the truth. I let arrogance and fear blind me to my responsibility. To Maya, to Caleb, I owe more than words can express." "Oh," gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions, but Travis held up a hand. "There will be time for answers. But first, I must say this. Caleb is my son, and no matter what it costs me, I will not deny him again." The statement was broadcast live, reaching Maya's small apartment. As she spoon-fed Caleb mashed peas, she froze, staring at the screen as Travis's words filled the room. Her chest tightened, anger and relief warring inside her. "Did you hear that, baby?" she whispered to Caleb. He finally said it, out loud, to the world. Tears slipped down her cheeks. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement was a beginning. That night, the city buzzed with reactions. Some praised Travis for taking responsibility. Others condemned him for years of denial. Investors panicked, but ordinary people argued on talk shows, radio, and social media. Everyone had an opinion, but for Maya, only one thing mattered. Caleb's truth had been spoken. In his penthouse, Travis sat alone after the cameras had left, the weight of his confession pressing down. He had spoken the words, but speaking them was only the first step. The harder part lay ahead, proving to Maya and to Caleb that those words meant something. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the master of his destiny. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a chasm, knowing that crossing it would take more than money, more than power. It would take humility, sacrifice, and the courage to face the pain he had caused. As rain tapped gently on the windows, he whispered into the silence, "I don't know if I can make this right, but I have to try." And in the Bronx, as Maya laid Caleb down to sleep, she whispered too, "The truth is yours now. No one can take it away. And one day, you'll know just how hard I fought for you." The storm had broken. But the path forward, filled with scars and possibility, was only just beginning. The morning after Travis Holt's public confession, the Bronx buzzed with restless energy. Maya woke to the sound of voices outside her window. Reporters had returned in full force, their vans parked along the curb, cameras ready to capture any glimpse of her and Caleb. She peered through the blinds and sighed. Even truth had its price. Inside the kitchen, the old radio hummed with talk show chatter. "Did you hear Holt last night?" one host said. "Finally admitted the kid's his. Took him long enough." Another voice cut in, sharper. "Too little, too late. He denied that boy for months. Money doesn't buy forgiveness." Maya stirred Caleb's oatmeal, listening with tight shoulders. She had wanted the truth out, yes, but she hadn't expected her private life to become public property. When Caleb babbled happily from his high chair, she forced a smile and set the bowl in front of him. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered. "They can talk all they want. We'll stay strong." Across Manhattan, Travis faced his own storm. His office was chaos, phone lines ringing nonstop. Investors demanding meetings. Journalists demanding quotes. Martin stormed into his office, red-faced. "Do you realize what you've done? Stocks are plummeting. Partners are threatening to walk. This could cost you everything." Travis leaned back in his chair, pale but calm. Maybe everything needed to change. Martin slapped the desk. "You can't just throw away your empire for some maid and a child you never wanted." The words stung, but Travis didn't flinch. He remembered Caleb's eyes in the clinic. Remembered the way the boy looked at him without judgment, without fear. For once, the empire seemed small compared to that gaze. "Leave," Travis said quietly. Martin froze. "What?" "Leave. You don't work for me anymore." "You'll regret this," Martin hissed. "Maybe," Travis admitted, "but I regret a lot more already." By evening, the news spread further. Holt had fired his lawyer. Some saw it as weakness, others as integrity. But to Maya, it was simply noise. She focused instead on Caleb, holding him close as Loretta visited with warm stew and warmer words. "He confessed, child," Loretta said, sitting heavily in the chair. "The world heard it from his own mouth. That matters." Maya shook her head. "It doesn't change the months of denial. It doesn't erase what he said about me, how he called me a liar." "No," Loretta agreed. "It doesn't erase, but it opens a door. Whether you walk through it is your choice." That night, Maya opened her journal again. She wrote fiercely, "Your father spoke the truth at last. The world knows you're his. But words are wind, my son. What matters is what comes next. If he thinks a speech makes him a father, he's wrong." A father is proven in actions, in showing up, in sacrifice. You deserve nothing less. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Travis sat with a glass of water, no whiskey tonight. He stared at the skyline, replaying his words at the press conference. He had spoken truth, but the silence that followed was louder than applause. He thought of Maya, of the fire in her eyes when she faced him at the clinic, of the strength she carried alone. Shame pressed heavy on him. The next morning, Travis did something no one expected. He drove alone to the Bronx. No aides, no security detail, no black SUV convoy, just him in an understated car, weaving through streets he had only ever passed on his way to the airport. When he stepped out, people recognized him immediately. Whispers turned to shouts. Some hurled insults. Others demanded selfies. A few jeered openly. He ignored them all and walked toward Maya's building. Upstairs, Maya heard the commotion and looked out the window. Her heart dropped. Travis, in a tailored suit darkened by rain, was standing at her door. The knock was firm, hesitant only in the silence that followed. Maya opened the door a crack. "What do you want?" "I came to talk," Travis said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard. Maya's jaw tightened. "You've said enough." "Not to you," he replied. "Not to him." He glanced toward Caleb, who peeked curiously from the playpen. For the first time, Travis's voice broke. "Please." Against her better judgment, Maya opened the door. He stepped inside, removing his soaked coat. The apartment was small, cluttered, nothing like his glass and marble world. He looked around, humbled. Caleb waddled unsteadily toward him, clutching a toy. Travis froze as the boy stopped at his feet, staring up at him with storm-gray eyes. The silence stretched until it hurt. Slowly, almost fearfully, Travis knelt. "Hi," he whispered. His hand trembled as he reached out, then stopped short, afraid. Caleb dropped the toy into his palm and giggled. The sound cracked something in Travis. He closed his eyes, tears he hadn't felt in years burning hot. "He doesn't even know who I am," he murmured. Maya crossed her arms. "He knows, love. That's more than you ever gave him." Travis looked up at her, shame raw in his eyes. "I was wrong. About everything. About you. About him. I can't take back what I did, but I want to try, if you'll let me." Maya's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to scream, to throw him out, to protect her son from further pain. But another part, the part that saw Caleb's joy in that moment, hesitated. "This isn't about you wanting to feel better," she said firmly. "It's about him. If you come into his life, you stay. No more denial, no more running." Travis nodded slowly, his voice steady. "Then I'll stay, whatever it costs me." "No." For a long time, the only sound was Caleb's laughter as he clapped his tiny hands. Maya watched them both, torn between fury and fragile hope. That night, after Travis left, she wrote again in her journal. "Your father came today. He looked at you and didn't run. I don't know what comes next, but I know this. You are no longer invisible. The truth has broken through, and now it demands to be lived." And across the city, Travis returned to his penthouse, soaked and shaken, whispering into the empty room, "I don't deserve him, but I'll try to." For the first time in his life, the billionaire who had always believed love was weakness began to understand that perhaps it was the only strength that mattered. The days that followed Travis Holt's visit to the Bronx were unlike anything Maya had experienced. The block buzzed with gossip. Neighbors peeked through curtains, reporters lingered in vans, and curious strangers loitered near the bodega hoping to catch sight of the billionaire in the worn stairwell of a crumbling apartment building. For Maya, it was suffocating, yet inside her small home, something had shifted. Caleb's laughter was lighter that week, his steps more daring as he toddled from couch to chair. And though Maya still carried skepticism heavy in her chest, she couldn't erase the image of her son giggling as Travis held out his trembling hand. That simple connection, fragile but undeniable, had cracked through months of anger. On Wednesday morning, there was another knock at the door. Maya tensed. When she opened it, Travis stood there, not in a tailored suit this time, but in a plain gray sweater and jeans. No aides, no cameras, just him holding a small paper bag. "I brought breakfast," he said quietly. Maya arched a brow. "From where? Some five-star chef?" He shook his head, almost sheepishly. "The diner down the block. I asked them what Caleb might like. They suggested scrambled eggs." Maya wanted to laugh at the absurdity, a man who could order caviar at midnight now carrying a bag of eggs in a paper sack. But instead, she stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, Caleb squealed with recognition and stumbled toward him. Travis set the bag down and knelt, scooping the boy into his arms. His movements were awkward, unsure, but genuine. Caleb pressed his tiny hand against his father's face, as if mapping the features he instinctively knew were his own. Maya watched from the kitchen, arms crossed. Part of her softened at the sight. But she reminded herself, actions, not words. Over breakfast, the silence between them was heavy. Travis broke it first. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. I want to be here, even if it's only for a little while, even if you still hate me." Maya's voice was steady. "I don't hate you. I hate what you did. I hate that you denied him, denied me, and made me carry the weight alone." She glanced at Caleb, who was busy smearing eggs across his tray. "But he deserves more than hate. He deserves truth. And if you mean what you say, then prove it with consistency." Travis nodded, swallowing hard. "I will." The following week, he returned again, this time with diapers and formula, things Maya usually scraped money together to buy. At first, she refused. "You can't just throw money at us like before." "I'm not throwing money," he said softly. "I asked Loretta what you actually needed." Maya was startled. The thought of Travis talking to Loretta, the sharp-tongued elder who had defended her from the beginning, was almost unimaginable. Later that day, Loretta herself confirmed it, shaking her head with a chuckle. "That man came down to the pantry asking about formula like he was buying stocks. Looked more nervous than a cat in a doghouse, but maybe he's learning." Maya didn't want to admit it, but small things were beginning to matter. Travis sat on the floor with Caleb, stacking blocks only to watch him topple them over. He listened as Maya explained routines, nap times, the lullabies Caleb favored. He even took a late-night phone call when Caleb spiked a fever, showing up with medicine and sitting nervously until the boy's breathing calmed. Yet with every step forward came shadows of doubt. Maya remembered too clearly the venom of his denial, the way he had called her a liar, a trap, a nothing. Could a man who had been so cruel truly change, or was this another performance, another way to save face? One evening, after Caleb had fallen asleep, Maya confronted him. "Why are you really here, Travis? Is this guilt, public image, or do you actually want to be a father?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "I don't know how to be a father. I never had an example worth following. My own father, he believed fear was the only way to raise a boy. He left me with scars you can't see. For years, I promised myself I'd never be like him. But when I saw Caleb, I realized I already had been cold, denying, cruel. I can't undo what I've done, but I can choose differently now." The raw honesty startled Maya. For the first time, his voice carried no arrogance, only vulnerability. "You don't get second chances easily," she said. "Not with me." "I'm not asking for easy," he replied. "I'm asking for the chance to try." That night, long after Travis left, Maya sat with her journal. She wrote, "Your father is trying. I don't know if it will last. But today, he showed up. And sometimes, showing up is the bravest step of all." Meanwhile, Travis faced battles beyond Maya's walls. His board threatened to oust him, investors questioned his leadership, and tabloids dissected his every move with Caleb. Some accused him of exploiting the child for sympathy. Others painted Maya as opportunistic. Yet, for once, Travis didn't fight back with denials or lawsuits. He let the storm rage, showing up at Maya's door instead of the boardroom. When Martin called, fuming about reputation and empire, Travis answered simply, "My empire doesn't matter if my son grows up believing he was unwanted." Silence on the other end, then a bitter laugh. "You've changed, Travis, and not for the better." But when Travis hung up, he felt lighter. For the first time in decades, he wasn't bending truth to serve power. He was bending power to serve truth. At the end of that week, he stood again in Maya's living room as Caleb toddled into his arms. The boy laughed, clapping his hands, the sound pure and bright. For a brief, fleeting moment, Travis allowed himself to imagine a future, not one of headlines and stock reports, but of playgrounds, school plays, and birthdays marked by presence, not absence. Maya, watching quietly from the doorway, saw something new in his face, not the billionaire, not the man of denial, but simply a father learning, stumbling, and beginning. She whispered to herself, barely audible, maybe. And though doubt still lingered, hope fragile, cautious, but real began to stir. For in that small Bronx apartment, amid chipped walls and second-hand furniture, something stronger than scandal was taking root. The measure of a father, not in wealth or power, but in the choice to stay. The second week of Travis's visits carried with it an uneasy rhythm. He arrived in simple clothes, never with assistants or reporters, often carrying groceries or toys in bags that still looked foreign in his manicured hands. Maya watched him carefully each time. She allowed him to hold Caleb, to sit on the floor and stack blocks, to read from children's books he stumbled through with a voice unused to tenderness. Yet every moment he stayed brought a new tension like a fault line deep beneath the surface, shifting, waiting to reveal whether it would stabilize or shatter. One evening, Maya found him at the small kitchen table staring at a photograph she kept tucked into a frame. Her mother, holding her as a child. He didn't notice her at first. His face, usually guarded, softened with something like grief. "That's your mother?" he asked when he realized she was there. "Yes," Maya said cautiously. "She died when I was 19. She looks strong," he murmured. "She was," Maya replied, "stronger than most people ever gave her credit for." Travis nodded, his eyes drifting back to the photo. "I never had that. My father believed in power, not love. He thought fear would turn me into a man worth something, but all it did was make me cold." Maya crossed her arms, her tone steady. "Cold is a choice, and you chose it when you denied Caleb." The words hit hard. He closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. "You're right. I don't expect you to forget, but I want to do better now." Maya didn't answer. She turned to stir the pot on the stove, the smell of beans and rice filling the small kitchen. Still, her heart beat faster. For all her anger, she couldn't ignore that his voice carried truth, raw and unpracticed. The next day, the outside world intruded again. Reporters cornered her as she left the diner. "Maya, will you let Holt into Caleb's life permanently? Is this a custody battle in the making? What do you want from him financially?" Their questions stabbed like knives. Maya shielded her face, hurrying down the block. When she reached the apartment, she slammed the door shut and leaned against it, trembling. Travis arrived later that evening and saw her distress immediately. "They followed you again?" She nodded, clutching Caleb tight. "This is what you brought into our lives. Spotlights, cameras, strangers shouting at me like I'm guilty of something." He stiffened. "I never wanted this for you. But it's here," she snapped. "And I don't know if I can survive it." Caleb fussed in her arms, sensing her agitation. She kissed his forehead, trying to calm him. "You walk into this apartment like you're learning to be a father, but outside, the world is tearing me apart because of you." Her words landed like blows. Travis looked at Caleb, then back at her, and his jaw tightened. "Then I'll protect you," he said firmly. Maya scoffed. "You can't protect me from whispers. You can't buy silence. Protection isn't about control, Travis. It's about showing up even when it's messy, even when you can't fix it." He looked at her long and hard, then nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll do. I'll show up." Days passed, and he did. He came in the mornings to walk Caleb to the clinic with her. He came in the evenings to help with dinner, even if he barely knew how to chop an onion. He carried Caleb through the crowded park, ignoring the stares, his face unreadable but his grip steady. And slowly, neighbors who once muttered began to soften, seeing that the man who denied was at least beginning to accept. Still, doubts gnawed at Maya. One night, After Travis had left, she sat with Loretta in the quiet of the kitchen. "Do people like him ever really change?" she asked. Loretta leaned back, folding her hands. "Change is a long road, child. Some walk it with steady steps. Some stumble. Some never get far at all. But I've seen men surprise even themselves. The question isn't whether he can change, it's whether you'll let him try without letting him break you again." Maya stared into her tea, the steam rising like smoke from old wounds. She whispered, "I don't know if I can trust him." "Trust isn't given," Loretta said softly. "It's built. Brick by brick. Right now, all you can do is watch how he lays those bricks." Meanwhile, Travis's empire strained under the weight of scandal. Investors threatened lawsuits. Board members whispered about forcing his resignation. For the first time in his career, Travis didn't fight them with bluster. Instead, he stood in a meeting and told them plainly, "I am a father. That comes first now. If that costs me everything, then so be it." The room fell silent, shocked. The man they had once feared for his ruthlessness now spoke with something far more unsettling: conviction. That night, he returned again to Maya's apartment, weary but steady. He found her rocking Caleb, singing softly in the dim light. The sight stilled him. "I may lose everything," he said quietly. She looked up. "You already lost the illusion you had everything. Maybe that's what you needed." He gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe." Caleb stirred in her arms and reached toward him. Travis took him gently, cradling the boy against his chest. The child sighed, content, and drifted back to sleep. Travis held him for a long time, longer than he had ever held anything fragile, his eyes wet with a grief he didn't hide. Maya watched silently, her heart torn. This man had once spat cruel words at her, had called her nothing. Yet here he was, broken open, holding their son like the only thing that mattered. When Travis finally looked up, his voice was raw. "He deserves a father who won't run again. I can't promise I'll get it all right, but I can promise I'll stay." Maya's throat tightened. She didn't answer, not yet. Words were easy, but as she looked at Caleb sleeping safely in his father's arms, she felt a flicker of something dangerous and fragile, the beginning of belief. And in that tiny Bronx apartment, beneath the weight of scandal and scars, the fault lines of the past began slowly, cautiously to shift toward something new. The scandal refused to die. Each week brought a new headline, a new photograph, a new wave of voices dissecting Maya's life, Caleb's future, and Travis's fall. But while the city debated, life inside Maya's apartment settled into something she had never imagined. A fragile routine with Travis present. He came in the mornings sometimes, bleary-eyed from sleepless nights of business turmoil, but determined to help feed Caleb. He came in the evenings, learning to rock the boy to sleep, awkward at first, but improving. Still, Maya kept her guard up. She never let herself forget the months he had spat venom at her name, denied her child, or the humiliation she endured in the hospital when he shouted that Caleb couldn't possibly be his. The image of him holding Caleb close now clashed with the memory of him walking away then. Trust was not a door she could fling open. Only one she cracked inch by inch. One evening, after Travis left, Loretta came by with bread still warm from the bakery. She watched Maya pace the kitchen, worry etched into every line of her face. "Child," Loretta said gently, "you've seen the way he holds that boy now. What more are you waiting for?" Maya set the bread down hard. "I'm waiting for consistency. For proof this isn't just guilt or a performance for the cameras. A father doesn't just show up when it suits him, he stays through the mess, the boredom, the sickness, the nights when it feels impossible. Until I see that, I won't let myself believe." Loretta nodded. "That's wise. Trust must be earned. But don't blind yourself to growth either. If he is trying, you'll know. Your heart will tell you, even if your mind still doubts." Meanwhile, across Manhattan, Travis's board met again in a glass-walled conference room high above the city. Tension hung heavy in the air. Investors demanded reassurance. Reporters hounded them for comments. Martin, no longer his lawyer but still his critic, spoke bitterly on television about Travis's downfall. "Your leadership is compromised," one board member said coldly. "We need you to issue a statement distancing your personal scandal from this company." Travis leaned forward, his voice calm but sharp. "There is no distance. I am who I am. Father and CEO. If you don't like it, you can vote me out. But I won't pretend Caleb doesn't exist." A murmur spread around the table. Some were outraged, others startled into silence. For decades, they had known him as ruthless, untouchable. Now they saw a man choosing vulnerability over image. When he left the meeting, cameras swarmed him. "Mr. Holt, will you marry Maya? Are you moving to the Bronx? Is Caleb your heir?" He ignored them all, his jaw tight, his thoughts only on the small apartment he had begun to think of as a second home. That night, he returned again, bringing children's books he had bought himself. Maya eyed the colorful bag with suspicion. "You think you can buy your way in with picture books?" He shook his head, setting them on the table. "No, but I want to learn to read to him. I never had anyone who read to me." The honesty in his voice silenced her. She watched as he opened one of the books, stumbling over simple rhymes while Caleb laughed at his father's halting cadence. For the first time, Maya felt her anger soften, just slightly. Yet the outside world remained cruel. A tabloid headline accused Maya of being a schemer. From Maid to Millionaire's Mistress. How Maya William trapped a billionaire. The photo accompanying it showed her at the diner, tired and worn, carrying Caleb on her hip, the words sliced deep. When Travis arrived the next morning, she shoved the paper at him. "This is what your world does to me." He scanned the headline, fury tightening his jaw. "I'll sue them. I'll shut it down." She shook her head fiercely. "No. You don't fix this with lawsuits or money. You fix this by standing beside me, not above me. You fix it by proving, every day, that Caleb and I are more than a stain on your reputation." Her words hit harder than any headline. He nodded slowly. "You're right. No more hiding behind power. I'll stand with you." And so, the following Sunday, Travis did what Maya thought he never would. He walked with her and Caleb to church, through streets crowded with cameras and whispers. He held Caleb in his arms the entire way, ignoring the shouts, ignoring the flashbulbs, ignoring the jeers. Inside the church, silence fell as the congregation turned. Loretta, standing by the door, raised her chin in quiet pride. Maya watched as Travis slid into the pew beside her, Caleb still in his arms. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire, not the man who had denied them, but simply a father who refused to run. After the service, as they stepped outside, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Holt, do you admit you love your son?" Travis stopped. He turned toward the cameras, his voice steady. "Yes, I love him, and nothing you write, nothing you say, will change that." The words echoed through the crowd, through the cameras, through Maya's guarded heart. She felt something stir, fear still, but also hope. That night, after she tucked Caleb into his crib, she opened her journal and wrote, "Your father carried you into a church full of eyes and didn't flinch. He said he loved you where the whole world could hear. It doesn't erase the past, but maybe, just maybe, it is the beginning of a future where you will never have to wonder if you were wanted." Across the city, Travis stood again at his penthouse window, watching the skyline. For years he had believed his empire was proof of his worth. Now he knew better. The true burden of proof lay not in wealth or power, but in love lived out every single day. And for the first time in his life, Travis Holt felt ready to carry that burden not as a punishment, but as the only legacy worth leaving. The headlines after the church service painted a different picture of Travis Holt. For the first time in months, the media shifted from scandal to speculation, from titan to father. Holt's transformation in the Bronx. Some commentators called it a performance, others a sign of sincerity. But for Maya, it was neither spectacle nor strategy. It was personal. She had seen the way Caleb clung to his father's shirt, the way Travis whispered softly during the hymns, his voice awkward but real. That image lingered even as doubt still pulsed in her chest. The days that followed felt strangely quieter. Reporters still lurked, but their shouts softened, curiosity replacing venom. Neighbors who once sneered now nodded politely in the hallway. Even the diner's patrons stopped asking sharp questions and began offering gentle smiles. For Maya, it was relief but also pressure. With every eye on them, every whisper about their future, she felt the weight of choice pressing harder. Travis visited often, sometimes staying until Caleb fell asleep in his arms. One evening, Maya found him standing by the crib long after Caleb had drifted off. His broad shoulders hunched, his eyes damp. She stayed silent, watching. At last, he whispered, almost to himself, "I wasted so much time." Maya's heart tightened. She wanted to comfort him. But the memory of his cruelty was still raw. Instead, she said softly, "Time can't be undone, but it can be redeemed if you don't waste another day." He turned, eyes meeting hers. "I want to redeem it. I want to prove to you and to him that I won't run again." She held his gaze, searching for cracks of insincerity. But what she saw unsettled her. A man stripped bare, no arrogance, no armor, only vulnerability. It frightened her almost more than his former cruelty, because vulnerability could be harder to resist. The following week, Travis faced his board again. Investors were furious, accusing him of tarnishing the company's image, of dragging personal drama into corporate halls. But when they threatened to force his resignation, he stunned them. "Do it," he said calmly. "If you think this company can't survive my humanity, then take it from me. I won't fight you." The room fell silent. They had expected battle, but not surrender. Some whispered later that his defiance lay not in clinging to power, but in letting it go. When news of the confrontation reached Maya through the radio, she sat at the kitchen table, Caleb bouncing on her knee. "He's changing," she whispered, half to herself, half to her son. But change doesn't erase the past. Loretta, visiting with her knitting bag, looked up. "No, child, it doesn't, but it can write a different future. Don't mistake pride for wisdom. Pride says hold on to the hurt forever. Wisdom asks if there's room for healing." Maya sighed. "And if healing breaks us again, then at least you'll know you didn't let fear decide," Loretta replied, her needles clicking steadily. That night, Travis returned late, carrying Caleb's favorite blanket he had mistakenly taken with him the day before. Maya opened the door reluctantly. "You didn't have to drive across town for this." "Vet." "I did," he said simply, placing it in her hands, "because I promised I'd show up." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered quietly, and they sat in the living room. The silence stretched until Travis broke it. "I fired Martin. I told the board they could take the company if they wanted. For the first time in my life, I chose something other than money." Maya stared. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to know that I'm not here out of convenience or guilt. I'm here because I want to be a father to Caleb, and because," he paused, voice trembling, "because I see now that denying him was denying myself too." Maya swallowed hard. His words pressed against the walls she had built, shaking them. But she steadied herself. "You can't undo the damage. You can't erase what you said, how you humiliated me." He lowered his head. "I know, but I can live differently now. I can teach him that love is stronger than fear. Something I never learned until I looked into his eyes." For a long time, neither spoke. Caleb stirred in his crib, murmuring softly, as though sensing the tension. Maya looked toward him, then back at Travis. "He needs stability, not promises. If you want to stay, you stay through every storm. No more running, no more hiding behind money, just presence." Travis nodded, his voice steady. "Then that's what I'll give. Presence." The next day, Maya noticed something different. Travis didn't just play with Caleb, he cleaned the dishes, folded the laundry, even fixed the leaky faucet she had long ignored. It wasn't smooth. He cursed under his breath when the wrench slipped, and Caleb laughed at his fumbling. But it was effort. Raw and real. Later, as the three of them sat eating simple pasta at the small kitchen table, Maya caught herself smiling. For a moment, the world outside the cameras, the whispers, the lawsuits faded. For a moment, they were just a family. That night, as Travis prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Maya," he said softly, "I don't expect forgiveness yet, But I hope one day you'll see me not as the man who denied you, but as the man who chose to stay." She didn't answer. But when the door closed, she held Caleb close and whispered, "Your father is trying, and I don't know if it will last. But I see him, Caleb. I see him trying." Across the city, Travis returned to his penthouse. For years it had been his sanctuary of glass and marble, but now it felt hollow. He poured no drink, turned on no lights. Instead, he sat in the dark, thinking not of boardrooms or headlines, but of a small apartment filled with laughter, tears, and the fragile hope of redemption. For the first time in his life, Travis Holt no longer feared the shadows. He embraced them because he knew the only way forward was through them, and though the road was uncertain, he had finally chosen to walk it not alone, not untouchable, but as a man willing to be changed by love. Spring ripened into early summer, and with it the Bronx bloomed in noisy resilience, children's shouts in the courtyards, vendors hawking mango slices on street corners, music drifting from open windows. Life pressed on, messy and relentless. For Maya, the rhythms of her days changed too. The once unimaginable had become routine. Travis appearing at her door in worn jeans, Caleb shrieking with delight as his father lifted him high. The three of them squeezed around her small kitchen table like it was the center of the universe. Yet beneath the fragile peace, the weight of history lingered. Maya never let herself forget the months of denial, the humiliations, the cruel words that once fell from Travis's mouth. The memory of him in the hospital, proclaiming Caleb could never be his, lived sharp as glass. Forgiveness wasn't a gift she could hand out easily, but slowly, cautiously, she began to notice something she couldn't deny. Consistency. He came when he said he would. He stayed, even when it was inconvenient. He bent, not with power, but with patience. One humid evening, as fireflies flickered over the cracked sidewalks, Maya sat on the stoop with Loretta while Caleb napped inside. "He's changing," Maya admitted reluctantly. Loretta chuckled, fanning herself. "I've seen stubborn men move mountains slower than he's moving. But child, the question ain't whether he's changing. The question is, do you want to let him walk that road beside you?" Maya sighed. "I don't know. I'm afraid that if I open the door, I'll lose myself again." "Then don't open it all at once," Loretta advised. "Let him earn his way through, brick by brick. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding not to let the past chain your future." Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Travis faced the crumbling of his empire. The board stripped him of titles, investors pulled out, partners cut ties. Once hailed as invincible, he was now portrayed in headlines as a cautionary tale. But strangely, Travis didn't fight. He let go. One night, standing in his penthouse with boxes half-packed, he looked out over the skyline and whispered, "This was never home." His thoughts weren't on stock reports or losses, they were on Caleb's giggles, on Maya's wary eyes, on the feel of a cramped kitchen where, for the first time, he had tasted something like peace. The next morning, Travis arrived at Maya's apartment with no suit, no entourage, only a cardboard box in his arms. Inside were children's books, Caleb's blanket, and a framed photo of his late mother. Maya looked at him, bewildered. "What are you doing with all that?" she asked. "I'm leaving the penthouse," he said simply. "It doesn't mean anything to me anymore. This." He glanced around the small apartment, the worn furniture, the sound of Caleb's babbling from the bedroom. "This is what matters." Maya's breath caught. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity, a billionaire discarding marble floors for peeling paint. But another part, the part that had fought alone for so long, recognized the truth in his voice. "You can't just step into our lives and erase the past," she warned. "I'm not trying to erase it," he said. "I'm trying to build something new, if you'll let me." That evening, Travis helped her cook dinner, burning the rice but laughing when Caleb smeared peas across his shirt. Maya caught herself smiling too, against her will. For a fleeting moment, the weight lifted, and it felt like family. Still, the outside world pressed in. Paparazzi snapped photos of them leaving church together. Tabloids speculated about marriage. Talk shows debated whether Travis's transformation was real. Maya ignored most of it, but one article struck her. Holt redeems himself through fatherhood? She slammed the paper shut. He doesn't get redemption just because he showed up for a few weeks, she muttered. That night, after Caleb was asleep, she confronted him. You know the world thinks this makes you a hero now, that by showing up, you've redeemed yourself. But I don't see a hero. I see a man trying to repair what he broke. Travis didn't argue. He looked at her steadily. Then keep seeing that, because that's what I am. His humility disarmed her. She wanted anger, wanted to hurl the weight of her pain back at him. But instead, she found herself staring at him in silence, her heart beating faster. Days passed into weeks. One Saturday, Travis suggested they take Caleb to Central Park. Maya hesitated, but agreed. Under the wide summer sky, Caleb toddled through the grass, squealing as pigeons scattered around him. Travis chased him awkwardly, catching him before he toppled. When Caleb threw himself against his father's chest, laughing, Maya felt something in her crack. Watching them together, she realized this was what she had always wanted for her son. Not wealth, not headlines, but love that stayed. That night, after Travis left, she opened her journal. Her hand trembled as she wrote, "Your father is not perfect. He never will be. But today, he ran through grass with you, until you laughed so hard you fell over. Today, he was simply present. And maybe that is the redemption we both need, not grand gestures, not headlines, just presence." Meanwhile, Travis sat alone in a rented apartment downtown, smaller than anything he had lived in since his youth. He looked at the cardboard boxes stacked against the wall, at the single photograph of Caleb he kept on the nightstand, and whispered, "I don't deserve him, but I will fight to be worthy." Weeks later, Maya and Travis found themselves together on the stoop again, Caleb asleep inside. The night was thick with summer air, the city humming around them. Silence stretched, comfortable this time. Finally, Travis spoke. "I lost everything I thought mattered," he said, "but I gained something I never thought I deserved. A son, and maybe a chance to make things right with you." Maya turned to him, her eyes steady. "You'll never erase the pain. But if you keep choosing him, day after day, maybe one day I'll believe you've changed." He nodded, his voice quiet. "Then that's what I'll do. I'll choose him. Every day." The streetlight flickered above them, casting a halo of gold on the cracked pavement. For the first time, Maya let herself breathe without the weight of anger pressing down. The future was uncertain, scarred, but it was also open. Inside, Caleb stirred in his crib, his storm-gray eyes fluttering open for a moment before closing again. Outside, his parents sat side by side, two people bound, not by perfection but by the fragile, stubborn hope that love, slow, stumbling, imperfect, could still rewrite the ending. And so the story came full circle. A child once denied, now claimed. A mother once humiliated, now unbroken. A man once powerful, now humbled. The past remained carved into them, but the future stretched ahead, fragile as glass, bright as dawn. Maya whispered into the night, so softly that only the summer air carried it. "We are not invisible anymore." And for the first time, Travis Holt believed her. The lesson of this story is clear and timeless. Truth cannot be silenced, and love cannot be denied. Wealth, power, and pride may build walls, but those walls eventually crumble in the face of honesty and responsibility. Maya's strength shows that dignity is not measured by status, but by the courage to stand firm even when the world mocks you. Travis's journey proves that redemption is never instant, but begins the moment a person chooses humility over ego and presence over excuses. And through Caleb, the innocent child caught in the storm, we are reminded that every life